You don't belong in first class, move before I call the crew. Caroline's voice cut through the cabin as she towered over Zoe Washington, who sat quietly in seat 2A, headphones still in hand, stunned by the sudden hostility. Passengers turned. A flight attendant hesitated. And Caroline, confident in her money and her privilege, doubled down with a sneer meant to humiliate. But while she staged her performance, Zoe simply lifted her phone not to argue, but to document. Because the woman Caroline believed was powerless wasn't just a student in a hoodie. She was a Washington heir to the very airline Caroline thought she owned. The Apex Global Airways flagship lounge at JFK's Terminal 4 was an oasis of curated silence and expensive recycled air. It was a world designed to insulate its inhabitants from the frantic egalitarian chaos of the main terminal. Here the lighting was perpetually set to a soothing sunset amber. The champagne was complimentary and endless, and the chairs were ergonomic marvels of Scandinavian design. Zoe Amara Washington sat curled in one such chair tucked into a quiet corner overlooking the tarmac. To the untrained eye, she was invisible. She wore a simple pair of grey joggers worn in sneakers and a deep burgundy hoodie with Howard University emblazed across the front in simple white lettering. Her hair was pulled back in long, neat braids, and she was utterly engrossed in a thick paperback, a dense biography of the architect Paul Revere Williams. She was by all appearances a college student who had perhaps won a contest or was cashing in a relative's one-time only pass. This was precisely the assumption made by Caroline Price Wentworth as she swept into the lounge. Her husband, Arthur, trailing behind her like a beautiful, well-paid porter. Caroline was not invisible. She was a declaration. Her blonde hair was a helmet of chemical precision. Her face a smooth, unmoving testament to the skills of her dermatologist. She wore a cream-colored Chanel travel suit that likely cost more than the lounge attendant's monthly salary, and the sharp clack, clack, clack of her heels on the marble floor announced her arrival like a new, unwelcome rhythm. She scanned the room, her nose faintly wrinkled, as if smelling something unpleasant. Her eyes landed on Zoe. They paused. It was not a glance. It was an assessment, an appraisal, and very clearly a dismissal. Caroline took a seat not too close, but close enough to be seen, and immediately began her performance. "Arthur, darling, can you be a dear and fetch me a proper glass of champagne? The Tietinger, not that dreadful Prosecco they're pushing, and see if they have any actual food. Not just these cubes." She snapped her fingers at an attendant. "Excuse me, this table is sticky. It needs to be wiped immediately." The attendant, a young man with a patient smile, hurried over. "My apologies, Mum. It's just filthy in here." Caroline broadcast to her husband loud enough for half the lounge to hear. "The standards are just evaporating. You pay thousands for a ticket, and it's like they're just letting anyone in off the street." Her eyes flicked pointedly, unmistakably toward Zoe's corner. Zoe felt the gaze. She didn't look up. She had been trained for this in a way. Her father, Julian Washington, had drilled into her and her brother a mantra. Never let them see you react. Let them show you exactly who they are. Information is power. Emotion is a liability. So she kept reading, or at least pretended to. She turned a page, but the performance continued. Caroline's phone conversation held, without the courtesy of a lowered voice, was a masterclass in unsubtle snobbery. "Yes, Bitsy, we're in the lounge." "Barely. It's practically a public bus station." "I saw a girl in a sweatshirt." "A sweatshirt. Can you imagine I've already put in a complaint? Arthur's firm, you know Sullivan and Cromwell, they have the Apex corporate account. Believe me, I'll be having a word with someone. This inclusivity is just a byword for a lack of standards." Zoe sighed a tiny, almost inaudible breath. She wasn't angry. Not yet. She was just tired. It was the same old boring script performed by a different, but fundamentally identical actor. She was flying to London to visit her grandmother for 2 weeks before her summer internship started at her father's firm. It was supposed to be a relaxing trip. Flight AG 101 to London Heathrow is now pre-boarding for first-class passengers at Gate 10. A soft voice chimed over the speakers. Caroline Price Wentworth snapped her phone shut, a predator spotting its prey. Finally, she huffed, grabbing her monogrammed Louis Vuitton carry-on. She and Arthur stood making a show of cutting the line of other passengers also rising from their seats. Zoe waited. She was in seat 2A. She was in no rush. She let the initial surge of anxious first-class passengers, the Carolines of the world, go first. She tucked her book into her worn leather backpack, slung it over one shoulder, and quietly followed the stream. She walked down the jet bridge, the anticipation of the long, quiet flight settling over her. She loved flying the solitude, the liminal space between continents, the time to just be. She stepped onto the aircraft. "Welcome aboard," said a flight attendant with a professional, slightly weary smile. Zoe smiled back. "Hi, thank you." She turned left into the hushed cream and burgundy cocoon of the first-class cabin. Her Pod 2A was a flagship suite, complete with a door that closed. She exhaled, relieved. Privacy. She put her backpack in the overhead bin, slid into her seat, and began to look for the headphone jack. And then she heard the voice. "Oh, you have got to be kidding me." Zoe looked up. Caroline Price Wentworth was standing in the aisle at seat 3C, directly behind and across from her. She was staring at Zoe with an expression of pure, unadulterated disgust. The cabin was a choreographed dance of quiet efficiency. Flight attendants in crisp burgundy uniforms glided through the aisles, offering pre-departure beverages. The scent of warm, mixed nuts mingled with the subtle, expensive perfumes of the passengers. It was an atmosphere of polite, manufactured tranquility. Caroline Price Wentworth was about to set it on fire. I'm sorry," Zoe said, pulling out her earbuds, though she had heard the woman perfectly. "This is first class, honey." Caroline said, her voice a low, condescending drawl. She didn't whisper. Heads in 1A and 1C turned. "I think you must be lost. The economy cabin is that way." She gestured vaguely toward the back of the plane with a manicured hand. Arthur, her husband, looked mortified. "Caroline, please," he muttered, tugging at her sleeve. "Sit down." "I will not," Caroline snapped, shaking him off. She remained focused on Zoe, a sneer playing on her lips. "I pay a significant amount of money to fly precisely to avoid this kind of mix-up. How did you even get past the gate agent?" Zoe looked at the woman, her expression unreadable. She had faced this before at charity galas her parents dragged her to at parent-teacher conferences, at her expensive private high school, at country clubs she'd been invited to. "The 'you don't belong here' speech. I'm in 2A. Zoe said, her voice calm and even. "That's not what I asked," Caroline replied, stepping closer. "I'm asking how. Did you use your mommy's points? Was it some program?" The word program was laced with venom, a clear euphemism for affirmative action or some other diversity initiative she found so distasteful. A flight attendant approached. This was Brenda, the flight lead. She was in her late 50s with a helmet of impeccably coiffed hair and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She had seen everything, and her primary directive was to de-escalate, which in her experience usually meant placating the loudest, wealthiest-looking passenger. "Mrs. Price Wentworth, welcome aboard. Can I get you settled?" "Perhaps a glass of champagne," Brenda said, stepping between the two women, her body angled slightly away from Zoe. "Yes, I'll have a glass," Caroline said, not taking her eyes off Zoe. "But first, I want to know what she's doing in this cabin. I'm telling you, she doesn't belong here. It's a security risk." Brenda glanced at Zoe. It was a quick, appraising look. She saw the Howard hoodie. She saw the braids. She saw the backpack. Not a Birkin. She made a calculation. "Miss," Brenda said to Zoe, her tone shifting from concierge to hall monitor, "can I please see your boarding pass?" Zoe's stomach tightened. Not because she was wrong, but because she was being forced to prove she was right. She slowly reached into her backpack, pulled out her phone, unlocked it, and showed the digital pass to Brenda. The flight attendant's eyes widened just slightly as she saw the name. Washington ZA and the seat 2A first. "Thank you, miss," Brenda said, her professional veneer snapping back into place, though it was now tinged with a new, colder efficiency. "She is a ticketed passenger, Mrs. Price Wentworth. Now, if you would please take your seat. We are preparing for departure. Caroline looked thunderous. She had been publicly contradicted. She shot Zoe a look that could have curdled milk, then spun on her heel and practically fell into her own seat. 3C. This is ridiculous, she hissed to Arthur. Absolutely ridiculous. Zoe put her headphones on a clear, do not disturb sign. She closed her eyes, trying to recapture the peace. It lasted for approximately 3 minutes. Brenda returned, holding a glass of champagne. Your pre-departure beverage, Mrs. Price Wentworth. It's about time, Caroline snapped. As she took the glass, she simultaneously tried to wrestle her oversized Louis Vuitton tote from the aisle into her footwell. She fumbled. Perhaps it was turbulence. Perhaps it was a deliberate petty act of aggression. The glass of champagne arced through the air right onto Zoe's lap and her open backpack in the footwell. Oh dear, Caroline shrieked, a caricature of surprise. My apologies, it just slipped. Zoe lipped up the cold, bubbly liquid soaking her joggers. Her book, her precious book, was splattered. Her laptop case was wet. Oh my God, Zoe gasped, grabbing napkins. Clumsy me, Caroline said, a small, cruel smile playing on her lips. But then again, dear, that's what happens when you bring cloth baggage into first class. It just absorbs everything. Now my bag, she patted her Vuitton, is coated. It just wipes right off. You get what you pay for, don't you? Arthur winced and looked out the window, disappearing into the clouds. Brenda rushed over, but her focus was wrong. Oh, Mrs. Price, Wentworth. Let me get you a refill, she said before turning to Zoe. And for you, miss, here are some napkins. We'll be taking off soon, so you'll need to get back in your seat. There was no apology, no offer to help clean the bag, no reprimand for the passenger in 3C. Zoe was once again the problem to be managed. She spilled it on me, Zoe said, her voice dangerously quiet. It was an accident, dear, Caroline chimed in. Don't be so dramatic. Brenda just offered more napkins. The lavatory is at the front of the cabin, miss. Perhaps you can get cleaned up. We'll be closing the boarding door in 2 minutes. Zoe stared at the two women, the aggressor and the enabler. She saw the smirk on Caroline's face. She saw the impatient, dismissive look on Brenda's. Zoe took the napkins. She said nothing. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She simply sat down her clothes, soaked her belongings damp, and began to meticulously wipe down her backpack. She was no longer tired. She was, as her father would say, conducting an audit. And as she dabbed at the champagne stain, she made a very clear, very cold calculation. This was no longer a simple flight. It was an incident. And incidents in her world had consequences. The Boeing 777 surged into the sky, leaving the lights of New York behind as it climbed toward the dark, cold expanse of the Atlantic. Inside the first-class cabin, the lights were dimmed and the clinking of silverware on china began as the dinner service commenced. For Zoe, the flight had been transformed. Her pod, once a sanctuary, now felt like a very luxurious prison cell. Her joggers were stiff and sticky. Her copy of A Legacy in Stone was likely ruined, its pages warped. But it wasn't the material damage that seethed in her. It was the humiliation. It was the casual, confident cruelty. It was the way Brenda, the flight lead, now pointedly avoided her aisle, sending the other younger flight attendant to handle her section. That flight attendant, whose name tag read Thomas, was a stark contrast. He was young, sharp, and had a kind, observant face. He had clearly been briefed on the situation. He knelt by Zoe's pod. Miss Washington. He whispered, his voice full of genuine concern. I am so sorry about what happened before takeoff. I have an extra pair of our first-class pajamas and a size small and a hot towel. It's not much, but at least you'll be dry. Zoe looked at him, and for the first time, her defensive mask softened. Thank you, Thomas. That's really kind of you. Can I get you some sparkling water? Or perhaps I can take your bag and see if I can clean it up for you in the galley. The pajamas would be great, Zoe said. And a bottle of water. Thank you. He returned moments later, passing her the sealed pajama kit. As he did, a voice sharp and grating cut through the cabin's hush. Oh, service, look at that. He's on his knees. I suppose some people just expect to be waited on hand and foot. It's a new generation, no class, no home training. It was Caroline, of course. She was speaking to her husband, but at a volume clearly intended for an audience. Arthur was hiding behind a copy of the Wall Street Journal, but Caroline was energized, holding court from her throne in 3C. She was on her third glass of champagne. Thomas's back visibly stiffened. He stood up, turned, and gave Caroline Price Wentworth a polite, steely smile. "Can I get you something, Mom?" "Yes," she said, holding out her empty glass. "Another one of these, and be quick about it and tell me, is it policy now for staff to, what's the word, coddle passengers who are clearly dressed for the gymnasium?" Thomas's smile didn't waver. "It's our policy, Mom, to provide excellent service to all our first-class passengers." "Well, your service has been dreadful," Caroline announced, "except for that lovely woman Brenda. She understands discretion. She understands the caliber of passenger we are. You, on the other hand, seem more interested in, well, you know." Thomas took a deep breath. "I'll get you champagne, Mum." He walked to the galley, and Zoe could see him take a moment, bracing his hands on the counter. Brenda was there, and she seemed to be admonishing him. Zoe couldn't hear the words, but the body language was clear. Brenda was telling Thomas to stop antagonizing the passenger. Zoe slipped into the lavatory and changed into the soft grey pajamas. The damp joggers felt disgusting, and she bowled them up, stuffing them into a plastic bag. When she returned, her pod felt a little more like her own space again. She sat down, put on her noise-cancelling headphones, and turned on a movie determined to ignore the world. But Caroline was persistent. Even through the headphones, Zoe could feel the woman's performance, the loud, braying laughs, the constant, obnoxious ringing of the call bell. Ding. Brenda dialing more nuts. Ding. Brenda, this blanket is it wool? I'm allergic to wool. Find me a pashmina. Something better. Ding. Brenda, my husband's screen is frozen. You need to fix it now. Brenda, for her part, seemed to relish the attention from 3C. She was all smiles and, yes, Mrs. Price Wentworth, and of course, Mrs. Price Wentworth. She was validating Caroline's behaviour, implicitly agreeing that this passenger was special important and deserving of a different set of rules. The final straw came about 2 hours into the flight. Zoe had her headphones on, but she had paused her movie. She was listening. Caroline was now on the in-flight phone, a feature almost no one used. She was presumably speaking to a friend on the ground via the satellite Wi-Fi. "You will not believe it, Bitsy." She cackled. "The airline's diversity quoting right in front of me. Yes, in a hoodie. I accidentally spilled champagne all over her, you know, her bag of backpack." It was hilarious. She looked like she was about to cry. Then the other one, this little flight boy, practically got on his knees to clean up after her. It's a world gone mad. Anyway, I'm writing a letter to commend that one older attendant, Brenda. She's the only one with any sense. She knew quality when she saw it. Zoe's blood ran cold. Hilarious. She looked like she was about to cry. The other one. The calm, the training, the practiced detachment. It all evaporated, replaced by a cold, precise anger. This was no longer just rudeness. This was malice. This was sport. Zoe took off her headphones. She picked up her phone. She looked at the screen, her thumb hovering over a name in her contacts. She had been taught not to use the card. Her father had always said, "The moment you tell them who you are, you lose all power. You become a name, not a person. You have to handle your own business." But this was business. This was an employee, Brenda, actively enabling harassment. This was a passenger, Caroline, creating a hostile environment for profit and pleasure. This was a systemic failure. Her father was wrong about one thing. Sometimes, to handle your business, you had to use the name. She switched her phone to the in-flight Wi-Fi, which she knew was free for her, and opened her messaging app. She didn't text her father. He was in Singapore. It was the middle of the night, and he would overreact. She texted Uncle R.J. Reginald James, her mother's brother. He wasn't actually her uncle, but he was her godfather, a senior partner at her father's firm, and most importantly, he sat on the board of directors for Apex Global Airways. Her text was simple, professional, and void of emotion. It was a report to Uncle RJ from Zoe, Washington. Subject incident on AG 101. JFK LHRRJ. Apologies for the late hour. I am on flight AG 101. Passenger in 3C Caroline Price Wentworth has been engaged in targeted racial harassment since boarding culminated in a deliberate champagne spill which flight lead Brenda witnessed and dismissed. Brenda is now actively enabling 3C's behaviour and reprimanding other staff Thomas for offering basic customer service. 3C is currently on the satellite phone broadcasting racial slurs about me across the cabin. It is a hostile environment. I am documenting, but this is a clear liability for the airline. Please advise. She hit send. A delivered receipt appeared. She then opened her phone's camera, angled it just slightly, and discreetly filmed 30 seconds of Caroline's world gone mad monologue. She attached the file. A moment later, 3 dots appeared. RJ was typing from Uncle RJ Zoe. I'm so sorry. Are you safe to Zoe, Washington? Yes, just angry. From Uncle RJ, do not engage. I am handling this. I am on the phone with Mark O'Malley in London right now. He is the head of in-flight experience. He or a member of his senior team will be meeting the flight at the gate. Do not engage with the passenger. Do not alert the flight crew. Just sit tight. We will handle this. From Uncle RJ and Zoe, I am proud of you. That was a perfect report. Zoe closed her phone. She put her headphones back on. She unpaused her movie, but she wasn't watching. She was waiting. Across the aisle, Caroline Price Wentworth, oblivious, ordered another champagne. Caroline Price Wentworth was in her own mind the protagonist of the universe. She was old money, or at least had married into it so successfully and for so long that the distinction was meaningless. Her sense of self-worth was built on a foundation of external validations. The brand of her purse, the exclusivity of her country club, the zip code of her Hampton summer home, and most importantly, the difference of those she considered the help. This flight was so far a resounding success. She had put a presumptuous affirmative action case in her place, and she had identified a flight attendant, Brenda, who correctly recognized her as cabin royalty. Arthur, you're not listening, she said, poking her husband, who was desperately trying to sleep. I'm telling you, I'm going to write a glowing letter about that Brenda. I'll send it straight to the CEO's office. Arthur's firm Sullivan and Cromwell handles their London litigation. You know, she said to Brenda, who was passing by. Brenda's smile widened. Oh, Mrs. Price Wentworth, that's so kind of you. But really just doing my job. Nonsense. Caroline beamed. You are a professional. Unlike that boy. He's sulking in the galley, probably on his phone complaining about microaggressions. You can't even say anything anymore without someone being offended. The world has certainly changed, Mom Brenda said, with a knowing conspiratorial sigh. It's changed for the worse, Caroline declared. But people like us, Brenda, we have to maintain the standards. It's up to us. Absolutely, Mom. Can I bring you a warm towel before we dim the lights for landing sea service? Caroline said to Arthur's sleeping form. That's all I ask. As Brenda walked away, her entire demeanour shifted, her professional smile inverted into a look of pure, unadulterated triumph. She felt it. The big tip, the glowing letter to corporate, maybe even a direct line to this woman's husband at his powerful law firm. She had played the game and won. Siding with the real passengers always paid off. That young girl in 2A was a nobody, a college kid on a lucky break. This woman in 3C, she was a connection. Brenda began preparing the landing service, humming to herself. She made a mental note to write up Thomas for his disrespectful attitude toward a high-value passenger. Meanwhile, 5 fathom below them, in a sterile operations centre at Heathrow, the landing service was also being prepared, but it was of a very different kind. Marco Marley Apex's head of in-flight experience for the Europe, Middle East and Africa region was not humming. He was a man with a perpetually furrowed brow, a receding hairline and a stomach lining that had been sacrificed to the god of customer complaints years ago. His phone had buzzed at 4:15 a.m. A text from Reginald James. RJ was not just a board member, he was the board member. He was Julian Washington's right-hand man, the conciliary, the man who held the real power. A text from RJ at 4:00 a.m. was the corporate equivalent of a 5-alarm fire. Mark read the text. He read the transcript. He watched the 30-second on video and the blood drained from his face. Washington. He didn't just see the name, he saw the pie chart. Washington Capital Partners, 35% stake, the single largest shareholder. Julian Washington wasn't just an investor. He was the owner, and his daughter, his only daughter, was currently being harassed on their flagship route. Oh, sweet mother. Mark whispered, his coffee forgotten. He didn't call the CEO. The CEO slept. Marco Ali was paid not to wake the CEO. He was paid to fix things. His fingers flew across his keyboard to LHR. A security lead LHR terminal in OPI's LHR protocol team. Subject Urgent Priority 1 Meet and Greet AG101, all divert from standard protocol. AG1 landing at 065. We will have a Priority 1 red flag deplaning. I need 2 senior security personnel and 1 protocol officer to meet me at the gate 15. This is not a celebrity. This is a WCP situation. No police, no blue lights, discreet professional. The targets are passengers in 3C and 3D Wentworth Arthur and Caroline. They are to be diverted to the Windsor Suite, our private incident room, immediately upon deplaning. They are not to proceed to the lounge. They are not to proceed to their connection. I also need a protocol officer to meet passenger in 2A Washington Zoe. She is the principal. She is to be escorted separately and with extreme courtesy to the Apex First Wing, bypassing all standard immigration. Her grandmother's car will be waiting. I want real-time logs from the flight. I want the flight lead Brenda and F.A. Thomas to report to my office immediately upon clearing customs. Their flight back to JFK is suspended pending review. I will be at the gate personally. This is a code Washington. No mistakes. He hit send. The code Washington was an unofficial term. It was reserved for the kind of problem that could get everyone in the room fired. Mark O'Malley grabbed his jacket. He looked at the video from Zoe's phone one more time. Caroline's braaying laugh. It's a world gone mad. You have no idea, Mark muttered, already walking. You have no idea what you just did. Back on the plane, the lights came up. The captain's voice crackled over the PA. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We are beginning our initial descent into London Heathrow. We should be on the ground in approximately 30 minutes. Flight attendants, please prepare the cabin for landing. A palpable shift in energy. Passengers awoke stretching. Caroline Price Wentworth was touching up her makeup. Arthur, fix your tie. We're meeting the Hendersons for lunch at the Wolseley. We can't look like we just travelled. Zoe Washington was putting her paperback book, now stiff and warped, back into her bag. She swapped her pajamas for a fresh t-shirt and the same grey joggers. She felt the plain bank saw the first glimmers of dawn over the English countryside. She checked her phone. One new message from Uncle RJ team is on the ground. Marco Ali, he's a good man. You'll be handled. Just walk off the plane. They'll find you. Zoe took a deep breath. She looked over at Caroline. The woman caught her eye and gave her a final triumphant smirk. A wink as if to say, I won. Zoe just held her gaze. She didn't smile. She didn't scowl. She just watched. You have no idea, Zoe thought, echoing the very words of the man who was waiting for them at the gate. You really, really don't. The thud of the landing gear on the tarmac at Heathrow was a punctuations mark. For Zoe, it was the end of an ordeal. For Caroline, it was the beginning of her holiday. For Mark O'Malley, standing at the mouth of the jet bridge, it was showtime. The fastened seatbelt sign pinged off. In the first-class cabin, there was the usual polite rustling of people gathering their ludicrously expensive belongings. Brenda, darling, thank you again. You were a star, Caroline called out as she pulled her Vuitton tote from the overhead. It was my pleasure. Mrs. Price went. Brenda beamed, positioning herself at the doorway for the goodbyes. I do hope you'll remember to send that letter. Ah, oh, it's already as good as written, dear, Caroline said. As she stepped into the aisle, she found herself behind Zoe, who was calmly putting her backpack on. Caroline couldn't resist one final jab. Do try to have a lovely time in London, honey, she whispered, leaning in. And maybe buy a new bag, something leather. Zoe turned her face impassive. Thank you for the advice, she said, her voice clear and carrying. And thank you for the champagne. It was memorable. Caroline's face twisted, unsure if she was being mocked. But before she could reply, the door was open and passengers were moving. Zoe stepped off the plane first, among the first wave. She stepped into the jet bridge and saw them immediately. A man in a perfectly tailored dark blue Apex suit, Marco Ali. Next to him, a younger woman also in a suit with an iPad, and slightly behind them, two broad-shouldered men in security uniforms, their hands clasped. Miss Washington, the woman with the iPad said, stepping forward, her voice soft and respectful. I'm Zoe, she said. My name is Sarah. I'm with the protocol team. Mr. O'Malley and I will be escorting you. We have a car waiting to take you directly to the first wing. Your grandmother is on her way. We can bypass the main terminal. Thank you, Zoe said. Thank you. Right this way, Sarah said, guiding Zoe past the general flow toward a private elevator. This entire seamless high-level exchange took less than 10 seconds. But Caroline Price Wentworth, who was stepping off the plane right behind Zoe, saw it all. She saw the suits. She saw the security. She saw the girl in the hoodie being greeted like royalty. And her brain, wired for status, couldn't compute. What Mark O'Malley had let his colleague handle Zoe. His focus was on the passenger behind her. As Carolyn and Arthur stepped into the jet bridge, he put up a polite, firm hand. Mrs. Price Wentworth. Mr. Wentworth. Caroline, flustered by the scene with Zoe, immediately brightened. Aha, they were here for her. The glowing letter, the Sullivan and Cromwell connection. It had worked already. Yes, she said, pining. You must be from the executive team. I'm not surprised. I had such a wonderful flight. I was just telling my husband, your flight lead, Brenda is a credit to your airline. Mark O'Malley's face was a mask of professional granite. He did not smile. That's good to hear, ma'am, he said, his voice flat and cold. My name is Mark Ali, head of in-flight experience. We're here to see you, if you'll please come with me. We have a private suite ready for you to discuss your flight. Oh, Caroline trilled, delighted. She looked at Arthur. See, they're rolling out the red carpet. Arthur, however, a corporate lawyer, sensed a trap. The security guards were not smiling. Ali's eyes were cold. This wasn't a thank you. This was an internal investigation. Mark is it, Arthur said, stepping forward. All business. Arthur Wentworth. Is there a problem? We'd prefer to discuss it in private, Sir Ali said. Right this way. He gestured not toward the terminal, not toward the lounge, but toward a nondescript grey door midway down the jet bridge. A suite in the jet bridge, Caroline asked, her voice losing its confidence. The Windsor suite. It's an incident resolution room, Ali said, all pretense of hospitality gone. One of the security guards opened the door. Inside was not a suite. It was a small windowless room, beige walls, a metal table, 4 chairs, a water cooler. It was a place where passports were checked and visas were denied. It was a place of consequences. What is the meaning of this? Caroline demanded, her voice suddenly shrill. Please sit, Ali said. He did not sit. He stood flanked by the security, his hands clasped behind his back. I will not. I have a car waiting. We're having lunch at the Wolseley. Your lunch engagement will be postponed, Ali said. Mrs. Price Wentworth. Mr. for Wentworth, we have received a formal high-priority complaint regarding your conduct on this flight. Specifically, violations of Section 4A of the Apex Passenger Conduct Agreement, which I am sure you both read the section regarding verbal harassment, intimidation, and racially motivated abuse. Caroline's blood ran cold. What, that's ludicrous, she sputtered. Who that girl? The one I accidentally... There was no accident, Caroline Ali said, and the use of her first name, cold and clinical, hit her like a slap. He gestured to the wall where a small screen was embedded. He tapped his own iPad. The 30-cond video Zoe had filmed flickered to life. Caroline's own voice filled the sterile room. "You will not believe it, Bitsy. The airline's diversity quote on a hoodie. I accidentally spilled champagne all over her. It was hilarious." She looked like she was about to cry. Arthur Wentworth's face went white. He slumped into one of the metal chairs. He recognized the sound of a multi-million-dollar lawsuit. Caroline was speechless. Her mouth opened and closed. She was, for the first time in her adult life, completely and utterly cornered. That's out of context." She finally managed her voice, a desperate squeak. "Is it?" O'Malley asked. "Because we also have a sworn statement from flight attendant Thomas who corroborates the entire incident from the lounge at JFK to the champagne spill, to the constant verbal harassment. And we have a log from flight lead Brenda, who it seems you have attempted to bribe with promises of good reviews in exchange for her enabling your behavior. Bribe, I am a Diamond Medallion member. I am a high-value customer. I do. You know who I am?" It was the question, the one she always asked, the one that always worked. And Mark O'Malley, a man who had been waiting his entire career for this moment, finally smiled. It was not a nice smile. "Oh yes, Mrs. Price Wentworth," he said, tapping his iPad. Her entire profile came up on the screen. Her picture, her address, her husband's firm, her travel history. "We know exactly who you are." He tapped the screen again. "But the real question, the only question that matters today is, do you know who she is?" The beige room felt like it was shrinking. The air was thick and stale. Caroline Price Wentworth, who an hour ago was the queen of the cabin, was now a defendant in a box. Who is she? Caroline whispered, the bravado completely gone, replaced by a dawning, sickening dread. Arthur looked up, his lawyer's brain rapidly processing the code Washington he'd heard Ali mutter into his radio. "Washington? Oh, God, no. Who is she?" O'Malley repeated, savouring the moment. He tapped his iPad, and the screen on the wall changed. It was Zoe's passenger profile, a simple professional headshot, the kind used for corporate badges. Name Washington Zoe Amara seat. Two-way status redacted. Board level. Notes WCP family. Extend all courtesies. Do not engage. Report all incidents. I don't understand. Caroline said, her eyes fixed on the WCP acronym. Washington. What is WCP? Arthur Wentworth put his head in his hands. He knew. Washington Capital Partners. Ali supplied his voice a neutral, devastating monotone. The private equity firm, the one that, as of the last fiscal quarter, holds a 35% controlling interest in Apex Global Airways. He let the silence hang thick and heavy. The young woman you harassed for 6 hours, the one you called a diversity quote, the one you deliberately spilled champagne on, was Zoe Amara Washington. She is the daughter of Julian Washington, our owner, our boss, the man who signs at the very end of the line all of our paychecks. Caroline's face was a mask of pure uncomprehending horror. It was a breakdown of the laws of physics. The world as she knew it had just inverted. The help was the owner. The riffraff was the royalty. No, she whispered. No, that's not possible. She was in a hoodie. She was in a hoodie, Ali agreed. And now, for the consequences of your actions. He became brisk. All business. As of OLO 6:15. Greenwich, meantime, your Apex Global accounts, Mrs. Price Wentworth and yours, Mr. Wentworth, have been permanently terminated. Terminated, Arthur squeaked, snapping his head up. I did nothing. I was asleep. You were complicit, sir. Ali said, not even looking at him. Your Diamond Medallion status, your million-miler accounts, all of your acred points currently, 2.8 million I see, are forfeited. Effective immediately, you are both placed on the permanent no-fly list for Apex Global. A note detailing this incident will be attached to your travel profile, which, as you know, is shared with our Sky Alliance partners. I expect you will find traveling with Delta Air France and KM difficult from now on. Caroline made a small choking sound. Wait, Arthur stammered, standing up. You can't do that. I'm a lawyer. We have rights. You have the right to not fly our airline, Ali countered. You waived your other rights when you violated Section 4A. Please sit down, sir. One of the security guards took a half step forward. Arthur sat. Your luggage, which you checked in New York, will be misplaced. O'Malley continued, a hint of grim satisfaction in his voice. We will, of course, launch a full investigation, but I have a feeling it may be several weeks before it's located, if at all. You will be compensated the standard legally mandated minimum for lost baggage. I believe it's 500 hulless. Caroline looked at her husband, her eyes screaming her Louboutins, her custom-made gowns for the London season, her jewellery. And finally, O'Malley said, Your connecting flight to Paris is of course cancelled. You will not be entering the Apex Lounge. You will not be entering the terminal. Security will escort you to landside arrivals, where you will be released to the general public. From there, how you get to the Wolseley is frankly no longer our concern. He gestured to the door. But our bags, Caroline wailed. We have nothing. Our clothes. You have what you carried on, Ali said. And Mrs. Price Wentworth, he added as she was being ushered out. A word of advice. I hear that cloth baggage absorbs everything. You get what you pay for, don't you? He repeated her own words back to her, and the cruelty of it. The perfection of the karma was so profound that Caroline actually staggered as if physically struck. You can't do this to me, she shrieked, her voice echoing in the concrete jet bridge. I am Caroline Price Wentworth. No, Mark O'Malley said, as the security guards firmly took her arms. You're not. Not anymore. They were marched not like passengers, but like prisoners down the long corridor, past the gleaming duty-free shops, and unceremoniously deposited outside the main security checkpoint where the blur-eyed backpack-wearing masses of economy passengers were flooding in. Caroline stood on the curb in her now wrinkled Chanel suit, with nothing but her Vuitton tote. Arthur, pale and shaking, was frantically trying to get a signal on his phone. Get a car, Caroline whimpered. Get an Uber. My phone, my corporate account isn't working, Arthur muttered, swiping frantically. Caroline, they locked my phone. A grimy public bus, the X26 to Cudden, pulled up hissing and spewing diesel fumes. Caroline Price Wentworth looked at her husband, and for the first time in 30 years. She began to cry. The fallout did not end at the curb. The karma, as it turned out, was just getting started. While Caroline and Arthur were having their meltdown at the bus stop, two other very different conversations were happening. The first was in Mark O'Malley's sterile office. Flight lead Brenda and flight attendant Thomas sat at a conference table. The power dynamic from the plane was gone. Here, Ali was the only one with any power. Thomas Ali said your detailed real-time report from the galley was exemplary. Your decision to offer comfort and an alternative uniform to Miss Washington was above and beyond. You represented this airline's stated values, even when your direct superior instructed you otherwise. You are receiving a written commendation in your file, a 10,000 Balsamitia bonus, and we are promoting you to flight lead effective next month, pending your training. Thomas was stunned. Sir, I was just doing my job. You or Ali agreed, and you will be rewarded for it. He then turned to Brenda. His face, which had been kind for Thomas, turned to ice. Brenda, you've been with this airline for 30 years. 32, sir. She said, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. 32 years. And in 32 years, did you ever learn the name Julian Washington? Brenda's face went pale. I've heard the name, sir, but it didn't register. O'Malley pressed. When you saw Washington on the boarding pass, it meant nothing to you. She was just a girl, sir, in a hoodie. The other passenger, Mrs. Price Wentworth, she was a diamond medallion. She said her husband worked at Sullivan and Cromwell. O'Malley finished. Yes, I read your report. You took a bribe, Brenda. I did not. Brenda gasped, truly offended. It was just a promise of a letter. It was good customer service. It was not good customer service. Ali roared, standing up. It was sycophantic. It was dangerous. You sided with an aggressor against a victim because the aggressor looked richer. You enabled with a smile 6 hours of racial harassment. You humiliated a passenger, a minor, for God's sake. She's 18. And you reprimanded the one employee who tried to do the right thing. I didn't know who she was, Brenda wailed. That is the entire problem, Ali shouted, his voice echoing. It shouldn't matter who she was. She could have been any passenger. Your job is to protect all of them. You failed. You failed the passenger. You failed your crew, and you failed this company. You are suspended without pay, effective immediately pending a full investigation. You will be flown back to New York in economy, and you will surrender your badge and ID upon landing. We are done here. Brenda sat stunned as Thomas was politely dismissed. She was left alone in the room, the glowing letter she'd been promised turning to ash in her mind. The second conversation was happening in the back of a black Range Rover sliding silently through the London traffic. Zoe was on the phone with her father. Are you okay? Zebug, Julian Washington's voice was deep, and on it, Zoe could hear the rumble of a man who had not slept. He had in fact been up all night on a parallel line with RJ, getting real-time updates. I'm fine, Dad. A little sticky, but I'm fine. Grandma's meeting me at the house. Good, good. Listen, Zoe, about what happened. Dad, please don't fire everyone. Zoe said, a note of exhaustion in her voice. That's not what I want. There was a pause. What do you want then? Julian asked. Zoe thought for a moment. She thought about Caroline's smirk. She thought about Brenda's dismissal, but mostly she thought about Thomas's kindness. I want Thomas, she said, the young flight attendant, to be recognized. He was the only one. He was kind. And I want Brenda to be retrained, not fired. I want her to have to sit in a room and learn why what she did was wrong. Firing her is easy. Making her learn, that's harder. Julian was silent for a long time. You are your mother's daughter, he finally said, his voice thick with pride. Okay, Zbug. Retraining it is a lot of retraining for the entire airline. And I've already spoken to Marco Ali, the other party has been dealt with. You won't ever have to worry about them again. Good, Zoe said. That's good. She hung up, leaned her head against the cool glass, and watched London wake up. But the world was already awake, and it was reading. A business blogger, a man who happened to be in seat 4A, right behind Arthur, had witnessed the entire pre-flight drama. He hadn't interfered, but he had listened. His blog, The Frequent Flyer, was a must-read ad for sea-white executives. His post, published the moment the plane's Wi-Fi was available on the ground, was titled The Most Expensive Champagne Spill in History, an apex global case study in customer service suicide. He didn't use names. He didn't need to. He described a woman in 3C dripping in Chanel and a quiet, dignified black student in 2A. He described the accidental spill, the enabling flight attendant, and the constant loud racist commentary. The post went viral. By the time Arthur Wentworth had figured out how to use a public payphone at Heathrow to call his office, the post had been reblogged, tweeted, and was on the desk of the managing partner at Sullivan & Cromwell. Arthur and Caroline arrived at the Claridges, but the concierge informed them their Amex Centurion cards were declined as their financial access vanished. Arthur received an urgent summons from his law firm, Sullivan & Cromwell. At the London office, the senior partner, flanked by HR and legal, was waiting. He explained that Julian Washington, a major client, had pulled all WCP accounts, 12% of the office's revenue, citing Arthur's silent and complicit behaviour during his wife's racist harassment. The firm was facing a financial catastrophe. Arthur was given an ultimatum: resign immediately with an NDA or be fired for cause publicly shamed and sued for 20 million dusols in lost billings. He resigned, his career destroyed in an instant. Meanwhile, Caroline's social life evaporated. Her friend Bitsy hung up on her. Her invitations to Royal Ascot, her board position at the V&A and her membership at Annabelle's were all revoked or under review. Stripped of their status, the Wentworths had become no-fly, no-buy, no-name, nobodies. The karma was total. A month later, Julian Washington addressed Apex Global's executives. He announced he was personally funding the AG101 initiative service, not servitude, a new mandatory top-to-bottom retraining for all employees. The initiative advised by Thomas focused on de-escalation unconscious bias and empowering staff to remove any hostile passenger regardless of their status. Per Zoe's wish, Brenda was not fired. She became the initiative's first graduate after 6 weeks of intensive retraining. She wrote formal apologies to Zoe and Thomas and was reinstated but on probation and demoted to junior crew on a domestic route. On her first day back, Thomas, now her flight lead, simply welcomed her and said, "Just be nice to everyone." Brenda Stocking Sodas finally understood her lesson. 6 months later, Zoe Washington was back in seat 2A on flight AG 101 heading to London. She wore a new Howard hoodie and was reading a book. The cabin felt different. The service was impeccable, but the staff now moved with a quiet, firm confidence. Zoe watched as a loud banker in 4C barked into his phone during the final boarding call. A flight attendant approached him. "Do you know how much this seat costs?" He snapped when asked to end the call. The attendant didn't blink. "I do, sir, and I know it doesn't buy you the right to delay this flight. End the call now, or I will have you removed." The man, stunned by her unwavering authority, immediately hung up. The other passengers looked on, not with annoyance, but with approval. Zoe watched the exchange, and a genuine smile spread across her face. She leaned back, closed her eyes, and for the first time truly relaxed at $30,000 FT. In the end, this wasn't just a story about a rude passenger. It was a story about the systems we build and the ones we tolerate. It was about how status is a currency that can be and should be revoked. Caroline Price Wentworth didn't just lose her flight, she lost her power. Zoe Washington didn't just win, she forced a multi-billion-dollar company to reevaluate its entire why. The hard karma wasn't just the public humiliation, it was the systemic change that followed. The AG01 initiative became the new gold standard in airline training, proving that true luxury isn't about obsequious service for the rich. It's about a safe and respectful environment for everyone. What do you think? Was this karma swift enough? Have you ever witnessed someone abusing their privilege in public? What do you think should have happened to Brenda the flight attendant? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you loved this story of justice and karma, please hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to see it, and make sure you subscribe to our channel for more real-life drama and powerful stories. We read all your comments, and your support is what keeps us going. Thanks for listening.